Please welcome the Atlantic's Managing Director for Events, Evan Smith.
Good evening. Good evening. I am, in fact, Evan Smith. I'm Managing Director for Events at The Atlantic. I want to welcome you to the latest installment of The Atlantic's Atlantic Across America series. We're so happy and so lucky to be with you tonight during the Night Media Forum. Thanks so much to our partners at Night, to Maribel Perez-Wadsworth especially, and to Alejandro Deonis and his team for letting us crash their party. Please give them a big hand. Great, thank you. We have a great program teed up for you. But before we begin, let me tell you a bit about what we refer to at The Atlantic in shorthand as AAA, Atlantic Across America. Late last year, we announced we would be embarking on a nationwide tour between now and the end of 2028. Do the math, that's 50 states in 36 months. More states than months, which means we'll be doing the live journalism equivalent of two-a-days. We kicked off in December in Boston, and we traveled last month to Phoenix and Santa Fe. Miami is our fourth AAA stop. Florida is a lovely place to be always, but especially in February. Right. We'll be in New Orleans and Durham next month, followed by Omaha, Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Burlington, and a long list of destinations we can't wait to visit. The goal of this ambitious initiative is to take our journalists to cities all over the country to convene discussions about the range of issues and ideas we cover. The health of our democracy, the resilience of the American idea, culture, technology, foreign policy, press freedom. To bring these conversations to our readers literally where they live. All of these events will be distinct, and all will be rooted in the communities in which they're taking place. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're so pleased to be able to bring this program to you for free. But of course, if you want to support the work of The Atlantic and all of our colleagues who make our amazing journalism possible, I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you're already a subscriber, well, yes, absolutely. I love a room where there's a hand, Maribel, for paying for journalism. I think that's absolutely great. If you are already a subscriber, special thanks. We do this for you, but we cannot do this without you. Now, I'm honored to welcome our first speaker to the stage. She is the award-winning independent journalist and the founder of the Center for Broadcast Journalism, Georgia Fort, who has reported on the biggest news-making moments in Minneapolis, including the sentencing of Derek Chauvin and the extraordinary unrest of the last few weeks. On January 30th, she was arrested by federal agents for her coverage of a protest inside City's Church in St. Paul. We are so fortunate that she was able to be with us here tonight to tell her story. Please join me in welcoming Georgia Fort. Georgia, welcome. It's good to be with you.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
Great. So from the jump, just to set expectations for this conversation, there are things you can and can't talk about.
That's right.
For legal reasons. Can't talk about that day inside the church, right? What you did and didn't do, what happened, what you saw. Can't talk about that. That's part of the case against you.
That's right.
The lawyers you've hired have said that's off limits.
Yep.
Right. So that was January 18th. That was the day of the arrest. Let's fast forward 12 days to January 30th. You can talk about what happened on that day.
Yeah.
So you're at home. It's extremely early in the morning. It's still dark. You wake up to forceful knocking on the front door of your house. Who's in the house with you that morning?
My husband had just left for work.
Yeah.
And so it was my three daughters, 7, 8, and 17, and my mother actually was there as well.
Right. As you wrote in the New York Times last week, you had prepared yourself for the possibility of being arrested because of the amount of publicity around the church protest and because of threats to arrest Don Lemon, who had also covered the protest, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And in fact, you just told me backstage something I did not know. We had talked about this conversation a couple times this week, but you told me that federal agents had actually come to your office in June.
Yeah, I was working on a story about some footage that I got my hands on that showed excessive use of force of federal agents in Minnesota 6 months before the murder of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. And so I'd reached out to the young woman who, in the video, you could see was choked. She was picked up and thrown, and then a gun was pointed at her face. And so for me, as a journalist, in seeing this footage, I was alarmed to see a protester treated that way and nothing be done about it. And so I felt like it was a story worth pursuing. I invited her to my office to interview her about what happened to her that day. And after the interview, she actually left out. We packed up our equipment, our cameras, our tripods, and we left maybe about 5 minutes after her and ended up finding out that federal agents had apprehended her. We were able to visibly see her in the vehicle. We started filming, asking, did they have a warrant? And there was no information given to us at that time. And so the story I was working on about the federal agents' excessive use of force quickly turned into a much different story about why she was being arrested. She's a Latino woman. Is she legally here? Then they had accusations against her despite the video evidence, and that case actually still hasn't resolved. Her court case has been pushed 4 times.
So even though you experienced this, and as you said, you'd prepared yourself for the possibility, when they show up at your house on the morning of the 30th, it's terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
It's absolutely terrifying.
Absolutely.
You told me this week your kids are still traumatized.
Yeah, I was talking to my 8-year-old daughter earlier today, and she said that she's afraid that she's home alone with her dad because she's concerned that ICE might come get him. And then, because I'm here, where would she go? And then seeing the stories about Liam all over the news, I think her mind went to, they'll probably take me with Dad. And so how do you rationalize that with an 8-year-old?
Yeah. Take us to the moment that this is going on. So how many federal agents are outside your house?
About 2 dozen.
About 2 dozen. 2 dozen. Amazing.
Yep.
So.
And DEA, which was humiliating.
Not just ICE, but DEA.
Homeland Security was there. We saw HSI, but mainly DEA.
Wow. Walk us through the sequence of events. So the knocks happen. What do you do? What happens in your house?
Well, I heard the knocks, and you kind of, it's 6 a.m. I'm like, did I? No, like I haven't had my coffee, and so I was like, I must be hearing things. And I remember trying to pull up the security camera, and it was so cold in Minnesota, it was actually frozen. So it was offline. The one by the door, at least. Another one actually was working. I found out later. And then they taped our doorbell camera as well. So even if it wasn't frozen, we wouldn't have been able to see anything. And so the first knock, I just kind of dismissed it as it was early and I was hearing things, but then the knock happened again, and my mother was actually coming up from downstairs, and she heard it. And so she went to answer the door because we were on edge. I had prepped my family that this might be a possibility, knowing that I reported on the church protest, seeing different people who work for the federal government making posts online saying arrests are coming, seeing 3 people be arrested the week before. And so she kind of, I think it clicked for her what it was after that second knock. And she went into Mama Bear. She started to ask them for the warrant. What type of warrant was it? Was it administrative or judicial? Was it an arrest warrant or a search warrant? Which then actually bought me some time to do some really critical things for myself, which I'm not Don Lemon. So if you're not in Minnesota, or if you don't live in some of the small markets that I've worked in through my reporting career, you probably don't know who I am, and that's okay. But under these circumstances, I just felt like it was really important for me to tell my own story so that the public would know that it wasn't just one journalist that was being arrested, it was two. And so while she was talking to them, and she ended up going outside to talk to them face to face and actually get the warrant and take a picture of it to send to my attorney to verify its legitimacy, I went live on Facebook. I had filmed her talking to I basically produced in broadcast, I would call it, I basically produced an entire news package. I gave whoever was gonna be doing the story audio, sound, I gave them some B-roll,
Yep.
and I gave them the critical information. And so as she was out there talking to them after I had pulled those two things, and then I also was able to pull a little bit of B-roll from, or I'm sorry, security camera footage, from her conversation out there, and I started sending it to like my old boss. He works at CNN, and he knows me. He was there with me at the beginning of my career. And so I sent it to him. I sent it to anybody who I knew knows about my 20-year commitment to journalism and media.
I think it's kind of remarkable, Georgia, that you didn't just freak out. I would have just freaked out. I would not have been so self-aware as to say, okay, I'm going to go upstairs, be composed, pull this stuff together. But you did that.
I feel like when you're fighting for your freedom, you know, you got to do what you got to do. And so for me, I just felt like that. And when you read the criminal complaint, I don't know if people in here have reported on it or if they've read it, but that I think is the determining factor for me, is for the court to know I am a journalist. And you know, at the end of the day, if we are at a place as a nation that says that journalists can be arrested and locked away for simply filming what's happening in their communities, then let that be the determination. But I don't want to be in a courtroom and not be recognized for who I am to my community and not be recognized for my body of work. I produced an independently funded and independent news program for television that was nominated for 12 regional Emmys, and we won 3. Thank you. I volunteer as the vice president for NABJ-MN. We just donated $5,000 for scholarships for young people to get into journalism.
Yep.
You know, like this is my life's work. And so to think about being before a judge and not being recognized as a journalist, that is why I had to set my fear aside in that moment and really just focus on telling my story.
Yeah. So go back to your mother going outside. This is interesting. And again, in our talking this week, I was fascinated to learn this. So it was an arrest warrant and not a search warrant.
That's right. That's
a material fact.
And it's why I shut the live stream down before I actually surrendered.
Yeah.
Because, and this is why I think we're at a point where people really have to start to educate themselves about what rights we have.
Yeah.
Because I want to comply, right? Yeah. But I also know I'm fighting for my freedom. And so if you have a search warrant, it's different than if you have an arrest warrant. If you have an arrest warrant, it means I need to come out and allow you to arrest me. If you have a search warrant, it means I need to let you to come in my house.
Right.
So understanding that, oh, okay, you're gonna arrest me. Well, let me make sure that my property is secured and that I can, as a journalist, protect my sources. I have a lot of leads, story leads I've been working on. I did a media briefing. I have unpublished footage of the aftermath of Renee Good's killing. And this is also public information. Well, that lives somewhere.
Yeah. And had they had a search warrant, they could have come in and they could have seized devices, they could have seized all that stuff.
That had nothing to do with...
Right. So your mother went out, the story you told me, I want to be sure I have this right. So there's a mud room that leads to a garage that is attached to your house.
Yep.
Right. And so your mother goes outside the mud room when the federal agents are outside, locks the door behind her, and then she goes outside to talk to them.
And that's the same way that I ended up surrendering as well.
But by doing that, by locking the door,
it created a barrier.
Created a barrier that they were not able to
Correct.
To penetrate. You also told me that you got your phone to your lawyers so that your lawyers could ensure that what was on the phone was not messed with when eventually devices had to be turned over.
I think I have some really great attorneys. I did not get them anything.
Yeah.
But they're very great somehow.
Somehow they just got it.
I was on my way to Whipple.
Right.
I'm not sure what happened after that, but I do know that I have a really great legal team that's very smart. And when you think about what we're seeing play out, even with the arrest that came the week before mine, there was AI alteration. So if we know that that's a tactic and a strategy, what do we do to protect ourselves against that?
Right.
And so I think it's really critical to have things cataloged somewhere.
And that was the point, was to get everything cataloged so that when the device ultimately ends up in the hands of the authorities, if they make a claim about what's on it, you actually have a way to rebut that.
Correct.
Because you've cataloged it. See, in the room are both journalists and civilians, right, today. For the journalists in the room particularly, I think this is fascinating because all of us in this business now have to arm ourselves, protect ourselves against the possibility that something like this will happen. And so knowing the difference between an arrest and a warrant and a search warrant is one of the many things that maybe we didn't think once upon a time we had to worry about.
Yeah.
But now we do.
That's right.
Making certain that your device, you kind of catalog everything on your device to ensure that. The whole conversation in journalism about don't let your phone be opened biometrically. Face ID or fingerprint ID, because that's something that you can't prevent. But if it's a password, they can't make you give them your password, right?
Yeah.
What other things do you think did you learn in this moment that the people in this room who do this work would benefit from knowing? Anything else?
Well, I would say as it pertains to being arrested, when I started grappling with the idea that I could be arrested, there was a series of decisions I had to make quickly.
Yep.
I lead my organization. I'm responsible for reports and I have grant deadlines and, this stuff kind of lives in my head and on my personal calendar. And so having to delegate, like bring people in the fold of what I'm working on and giving people access to be able to move things in my absence, there could be a lot of financial costs. I thought about if my door is kicked in and I have 3 kids.
Yep.
How do we quickly fix that? Who can access funds and from where? And so I actually wrote a pretty large check to a relative, and it was in the event of an emergency, in the event that I need legal funds or bail or replace my door, and then blank checks that were signed to give access to finances. I mean, so there's so many things. There's the Ready Now app, which with the click of a button, you can notify people that you're either in like medical distress or legal, having a legal issue, and you can put numbers in there, whether it's emergency contacts or your attorney's number, and then you can program who you want that alert to go to. Security cameras. One of the main camera that we were able to capture a lot of stuff from that wasn't frozen was broken the week before, and so I called right away and got that fixed. So I think there's just a lot of things that I personally thought about. But I think the thing that was most impactful was having a strategy to tell my own story in those moments.
So come to find out, in the midst of this, so representatives of the Department of Justice had gone before a Minnesota grand jury and gotten an indictment for your arrest on 2 charges. The first count was conspiracy against the right of religious freedom at a place of worship. The second count is injuring, intimidating, and interfering with the exercise of a right of religious freedom at a place of worship. That's their bill of particulars against you. The arraignment is Tuesday,
Correct.
coming up. You will, of course, plead not guilty.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And you're going to fight this thing vigorously.
Absolutely.
And will you keep working as this is playing out?
The best that I can.
Right.
It's challenging with my children.
Yeah.
It's also challenging for me
Right.
because the personal sense of safety that I once had, I don't really have anymore.
Yeah.
Feeling targeted, knowing that I did that report back in June, that then all of a sudden coincidentally led to federal agents arresting this one. You know, it's just, it's hard to feel safe. And when you feel targeted, you're like it's repression. I think that's the best way I can describe it, because every time I go out to report, I am now conscious and aware of how might this be perceived by the federal government.
Yeah.
You know, and certainly when you're facing federal charges that are extremely serious, I mean, the most important thing to you is your freedom. So,
Which, by the way, until recently, we took for granted.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I would say it's sad, because when you think about the importance of press and journalism, especially as it pertains to what's been happening in Minnesota, that's my home. It's where I'm from. I've been doing extensive reporting for a really long time, and on that specific day, there's really only two people who can give you the facts in the most objective way possible. And now we can't talk about it.
Yeah. Yet. The implications for journalism. So you wrote in the New York Times last week, "The charges I face for reporting on an event of significant public interest and concern raise a serious question whether journalism is still protected under the Constitution." It's what Maribel said yesterday morning. Do we still have those rights? Right? You're grappling with this, with the larger implications of this as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing it play out also in Minnesota on other constitutional protections.
Yeah.
But certainly as a member of the press, it makes you wonder. And I think we've seen an escalation. Certainly, this isn't the first time that this happened. Let's go back to 2020, when the CNN reporter Omar was arrested live on television. And I think that was the day I knew, if they can arrest a CNN reporter while he's broadcasting live on CNN with the CNN mic flag visible and a whole camera crew, they will come arrest me too. I knew that. And I honestly felt repressed from that moment. I don't know if folks in here are familiar with Mario Gravera. He too was an independent journalist.
Say something about him.
In Atlanta, he was doing extensive reporting on his community, just like I've been doing. His focus, the Latino community. As all of the ICE arrests were happening, he was out documenting it. He ended up getting arrested, and despite his attorney saying that he had a proper work visa to be here, he was deported. So we've seen the erosion of our rights as a member of the press. We, even going back to the incident in 2020, it's like, what was the consequence for that? And so I think that as a country, we have developed a tolerance for our rights to be violated with very little consequence. And so now it has fostered a culture where this is now normal. It's maybe outrageous the day you hear about it, and maybe that week. But kind of after that, the majority of people move on
so much
to
is
the
going
next
on,
story.
we move on. That's exactly.
Yeah, and so then where's the accountability? And I think, I'm wearing a shirt that says protect the press, because if we don't stand up now, if we don't draw the line, okay, it was terrible when it happened to Omar. It's extremely tragic when it happened to Mario. Like, when is it going to be
Yep.
not tolerated anymore? When is there going to be a consequence, a serious consequence? When are our rights actually going to be enforced?
I mean, there's the question of journalism and the implications for journalism, but there's also the question of implications for all of us, right? Again, this is the why should anybody outside of journalism care question. And you actually answered it in that New York Times piece last week. You said a society that claims to value our democracy cannot criminalize those who document threats to our democracy. This is not about journalism. This is about democracy. This is about all of us. This is about the most basic stuff. That's why other people should care.
You cannot be neutral about the dismantling of our democracy and still expect to be protected by it.
Yeah. It's pretty heavy stuff. It's heavy stuff. So we have just a couple of minutes left. Before we wrap, we've been talking about January 30th. I want to talk about January 29th and all the time before that. You said earlier, I'm an independent journalist. I've done this work for years. A lot more people know you now and know your work now than knew you before. Not to say that you were not well known before, but like now everybody knows you, but you had an entire body of work before. And there is this, tension is probably the right word, in our business right now about where we see and how we accept and reward and embrace independent journalists versus those who are in institutions. And I know that you have thoughts about this, and we're hoping to be able to put in a plug for independent journalism, and I'm giving you the opportunity to do that. So go ahead.
Well, this is what I'd say about that.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of concerns about the way corporate media is responding to this federal government. I think that we're at a time where most journalists who have studied journalism, when you ask people, like, did you learn in J school about how to cover an authoritarian regime? I have yet to find someone who can say they learned about that, right?
That was not on the quiz. I definitely will tell you that, right.
Corporate media is continuing to do the same thing, and I think independent journalists like myself, especially the pioneers of us who've been doing it now almost 10 years, right? We've started to challenge status quo, and we've started to challenge the ethics of journalism that don't serve where our society is today. In short, I'll give you this comparison. Journalism is at its blockbuster moment, and independent journalism is Netflix. But we're at the stage where we're still mailing DVDs.
We're not at the end of this yet.
We're not there yet, but we have the potential to be the #1 streaming platform in the world. But it's gonna require bold investment so we can build that infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know, and so being an independent journalist, it's a tremendous honor. I worked for a long time in mainstream media, but I think that we're going to see a wave, especially we just saw at the Washington Post, massive layoffs. Those journalists at this time, if you're a recovering journalist, you know it takes a long time to recover. Like, those journalists they're gonna wanna share those stories somewhere. Right. And the way that a lot of the social platforms are set up, you can monetize from it. But having 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 independent journalists doesn't really serve our industry. So how do we start to build infrastructure and support, not just for people who want to consume news that way, because the next generation, I'm sorry, they're not picking up newspapers. They're not sitting down to watch the 5 o'clock newscast. They're watching people like me on TikTok, right? And so how do we start to strengthen that infrastructure so that also when things like this occur, there's some support? Because it's one thing to be at a network like Omar was and be arrested and have the backing of CNN. And it's a whole nother thing to try to navigate this thing when you're a small operation, you're a small independent journalist.
Georgia, we're out of time. We will all be thinking about you on Tuesday and after.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Give Georgia Ford a big hand. Great.